Hi everyone, let's paint this seascape. I'm using 100% cotton paper and just these 4 colors. So let's get started. I don't generally sketch anything because I like the freedom of just painting. I've wet my paper and I'm adding a little Prussian blue. Let's see where it goes. I have an idea in my mind for a seascape. That's a touch of raw sienna. Just going to let the colors flow together. And some cadmium red light. Now I've just mixed a few different values of the same color and I'm adding it. I'm going to tilt my paper so that the paint flows downward. You can see it flowing, and whatever is excess I just dab it off. So that gives me a nice soft sky, as you can see. And now that the paper is dry, I'm laying down the first wash for my sea. That's cadmium red light and a little Prussian blue with a touch of red. I'm just painting it very loosely right now. And I'm using my ruler to get a very straight horizon line. There. I'm just blending it gently and adding a few lines to suggest water and perhaps a few waves in the distance. It's nothing much, I'm just letting my brush gently glide across the paper. The color mixed in here is Prussian blue and cadmium red in different values. I'm trying to bring some of the sky color down into the sea and sand. Let's see what I can do. Now that's where I'm going to lay down my wet sand. I'm not sure yet what I'm going to do on the wet sand. Maybe I'll add a few birds. That's my palette. You can see I'm mixing the red and Prussian blue. So that's the second wash for my wet sand. It's a mixture of Prussian blue, cad red light and raw sienna. You know, I've learnt you shouldn't get too caught up on the colors and the exact mixing. Just experiment. That's what I'm doing. And that's how we learn. Try it out. Unless you try it, you're never going to know how it's going to look. I'm softening the edges now. And I let it dry. Now I'm using a mixture of Prussian blue with cadmium red light. And I'm just gliding it across to give an impression or suggestion of wet sand. Sorry about all those shadows, but I'm using very rudimentary filming equipment. That is a little bit of cadmium red light. I'm trying to bring some of the colors in the sky onto the sand to hint at reflections. This picture is actually an image I have in my mind of Wildwood Crest in New Jersey when we had visited it for a few days. trying to give a suggestion of a little wet sand or a tiny little wave right there, and there's some shadow under it. I'm just spreading it out underneath. Again, that's just a mixture of Prussian blue and cadmium red light. Different values of the same colors. The titanium buff I've actually used only at the end of the painting, the bottom half of the painting, to suggest different sand that's not quite wet. Just adding some definition to those waves. I haven't sped up this video because there are some who wanted to see exactly how it's done, but you can speed it up, of course. You can just fast forward what you don't want to see. I'm adding some shadow. I might add some waves too. I might add some, waves with a splash of white gouache I might use. Let's see how it goes. I would always encourage you to try and work with a limited palette. There are a range of colors you can make by just mixing together 2 or 3 shades. And I think it's easier to work with a limited palette because then the picture comes together in a more harmonious manner. So I'm adding the darks to the waves right now, and then I might go over it with a little bit of white gouache. That's a little bit of a slightly more reddish mixture to hint at the colors being reflected. And that's the white gouache. I just want to emphasize a little bit. A little splash right there, some movement in the water. I'm using my rigger brush for this. It's a Princeton, and it's one of my favorite brushes really for details. Just adding a little bit of a crest there. All I'm doing is just, moving my brush back and forth. There's nothing to it really, just back and forth. A little scrape, a little touch right there, and you have a crashing wave. At least a little wave. I'm just dragging my brush across the paper and giving the impression of waves, the white foam of the waves. I'm adding a little bit of the gouache with a dry brush in the front, just to give the viewer an impression or trick the brain into believing that there's, wet sand and the remnants of a wave. I'm adding the same thing again in the sea, the same little bit of foam, just to give the waves a little life, that's it. You can see I'm barely touching it, just a little dash. I think that looks fine. I'm adding a little bit of shadow there. I have added a little more of the cad red light to the Prussian blue, and I've got a different value there. Just to add a little interest to the sea. When you look at the sea, especially when it's dusk, there are a whole range of colors that literally jump out at you, and I'm trying to capture some of it. I'm going to start to add my birds now. It's a very loose image of birds that I'm adding, really. Just an impression of the seabirds or the seagulls. I'm just drawing a very general shape, and a little bit of a reflection. I'll build up on that. I'm trying to give the impression of the seagulls standing in very wet sand, just enjoying the last remnants of daylight before they make their way back, roost for the night. Just going to do 2 or 3 seagulls to add interest to the picture. A little bit of a reflection. And just darkening the shadows there. And I'll add another seagull right there. I might add some pebbles or stones. Just a few things of what the sea throws up sometimes. Some reflection and dark shadows. I'm just giving the birds a little bit more definition. Again, these are just painted using Prussian blue and cadmium red light, a different mixture, but the same colors. I think I'm nearly done with that. Just a few final touches. I might add some little pebbles on the beach. Don't want it too dark. I always keep a paper towel handy, and as you can see at the top right, there is a scrap piece of paper that I always test my paint on before I actually put brush to my final piece, just to make sure that there's not too much paint or too much water in my brush. Okay, I think I'm nearly done. That's starting to look quite nice. I'm quite pleased with it. It's what I was trying to portray. So when a viewer looks at what you have created, the painting should speak for itself. It should convey a message. Now here's where I'm using my titanium buff. Again, that's a mixture with Prussian blue and the cad red light. It's just to give a little more depth to the picture. And I don't have much water in my brush, as you can see. I'm just letting it gently glide across the paper. A little bit of cad red mixture. And yes, I must add some birds in the sky. Just a few. And my painting is nearly done. Maybe another one there. And ready for my signature. Let's remove that masking tape. I love this part the best because you get to see what the painting looks like when it's going to be framed. And there you have it. Eventide. The beauty of dusk at the beach. I hope you enjoyed this painting, and I hope it will inspire you to create your own masterpiece. Do let me know what you think in the comments. Happy painting!